What's going on, everybody? Today we are going to be covering the difference between Aeroid mix and potting soil, when to use them, some of the pros and cons, so that hopefully you can make the best decision when it comes to your plants. So we're going to talk about three main things. Number one, we're going to talk about watering. So with an Aeroid mix, well, first let's back up. Let's cover the difference between an Aeroid mix versus a potting soil. So take a look here. Aeroid mix is right here. Very, very different, way chunkier, right? So this is Soul Soil's houseplant chunky mix, but this is a pretty classic Aeroid mix. It's also got some added goodies in it, but three of the main ingredients in an Aeroid mix are going to be your cocoa husks. That's these big, chunky pieces of coconut. You've got your bark. Here's a little, let's find a little piece of bark. That may be bark. That may be cocoa. Well, here's a piece of bark. There's lots of bark in here. That's a big chunk. And then you've got perlite. This also has some clay. It's got some volcanic rock, a little bit of organic compost in there. So it's got some added goodies, but those three main components, cocoa husks, bark, and perlite, are what make up kind of your classic Aeroid mix. As far as potting soil, this is made out of a lot more organic matter. So the way that Fox Farms classifies it is they call it aged forest material, I believe is their word, aged forest products. And it's got sphagnum moss. So sphagnum moss is going to be in, I would say, 95% of potting soils. It's going to hold on to a lot of water. And you know, I've heard a lot of things about sphagnum moss, about the CO2 emissions into the environment. So I think that's another reason that people that are trying to get soil that's a little bit better for the environment may lean towards an Aeroid mix. But there's a lot of other things too. So apart from the visual appearance of it, you can see this is big, it's chunky. There's a lot more air in there. It's good for Aeroid plants like monsteras. It's good for ZZ plants, good for philodendrons. A lot of plants with big roots that want to grow quickly. And that's the main reason that people use Aeroid mix, is to avoid any sort of root rot, because there's a lot more airflow, and there's a little bit less chance of water retention for extended amounts of time that lead to root rot. And then number two is it's easier for the roots to develop quickly. So if you're trying to grow plants at a faster rate, you have a higher probability of doing it in an Aeroid mix than in potting soil, just because the roots have a little bit more room to grow. So that's kind of one of the main reasons that people would use an Aeroid mix over a potting soil. But it's not all rainbows and sunshine. When it comes to watering, you're going to need to water your Aeroid mix, I would say twice as often as your potting soil. So if you're watering, say a 4-inch pot once a week, you would probably need to be watering your Aeroid mix about twice a week. So keep that in mind with your schedule, how you water your plants, how often you water your plants, and the time availability that you have. And then that third thing is going back to just your root structure, especially for alocasias, your elephant ear plants. I had one that I loved. It was a kind of a variegated elephant ear, and it tragically passed away due to root rot. And I'm kicking myself for not getting that in Aeroid mix sooner, just to provide a little bit more airflow. And with that sphagnum moss, it can hold on to water for a really, really, really long time. So you just got to be careful about that. And if you ever see your plants start to turn yellow or brown, it's worth investigating, especially if you think there's a chance that you may be overwatering it, or if the planter that it's sitting in is starting to collect water. You could be running into a lot of trouble. So I hope this has cleared the air a little bit. I hope it's been helpful. Just learning a little bit of the difference between an Aeroid mix and potting soil. I think both of these are great products. It's just about what you need, what you're using. And a lot of people with their Aeroid mixes, they like to add their own kind of fun spin to things. So I would not recommend adding peat moss ever to an Aeroid mix. But there's a lot of other things that you could add. And then last, before we hop off, I do want to talk about fertilizing. So in this Fox Farm Ocean Forest, there's a lot of different natural fertilizers in there. Most of them come from the sea. There's fish meal, there's crab meal, there's oyster shells in there. So a lot of different sources of nutrients for your plants. With an Aeroid mix, there's not as many sources of nutrients. This does have a little bit of compost in there, so there is some of that. But you want to be careful with your fertilizer, making sure that it has a little bit of food, but diluting it so that it doesn't burn any of your roots. So just kind of being strategic about that, and being aware that your plant still does need a little bit of food. So probably just putting a little bit of kind of slow release fertilizer in a really small quantity to help keep your plants growing happy and healthy. But hope this has been helpful. As always, if you guys have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments box, and we'll catch you next time. Take care.